All right, good evening, all. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Substitute teacher, Mr. Burden, and I needed more of a troubleshooting run with the technology piece. But Johnny isn't feeling well. Johnny has had some health issues dealing with COVID, and he's not going to be on tonight. So we all wish him well. We wish him health. But we're taking over tonight, and we're going to kind of do something a little different. The focus of tonight's topic is going to be Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan's governor, but also kind of COVID-19 responses from throughout the country, and just kind of talking about COVID. And we're really looking at expanding what's happening with difficult discussions, because we've had a couple round tables, we've had a couple guests, but really we haven't had too many difficult conversations and discussions because we can't get people with differing opinions to want to play on Thursday nights. But we're going to have this talk. I got two great guests that you've seen before, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Then I got a couple questions that I'm going to do to kind of get the conversation going. And then I'm also going to try and monitor the chat at the same time and just let our guests speak. So we'll start. Returning guest, one-time moderator, one-time fact checker, panelist. Stacy, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I am Stacy Deering, aka Professor D, your favorite local professor of urban politics, here to serve.
All right, and now De'Aaron, introduce yourself.
What's up, y'all? D. Easley here, graduate from Michigan State University, graduate from Full Sail University as well. Believe it or not, my BA is in media design, my master's is in graphic design, but out of everything, I love to do what my minor is, which is history and government. So that's where my passion is.
All right. So, kind of given the backdrop, like to always explain to our viewers. Hopefully, we get to keep them and we talk to them. But the reason why we started this group, Difficult Discussions, is honestly, I never knew Stacy before Difficult Discussions. Now, I grew up with D, but I think one big thing that happens is conversations on Facebook and comment sections, people's posts, their memes, as we talked about weeks ago. That's where people will find their energy. That's where they find their strength, and that's where they facilitate a lot of discussions. What happens is two things, though. People don't have conflicting points of view when it's on their page, or else they stop people from commenting, they delete the post, or they retreat away from having the actual conversation about it. So we wanted to talk about those hot button topics and show that people with differing opinions from different backgrounds can have those conversations in a safe space. And actually, it's not about changing people's minds, but giving people different perspectives and input to at least make sure that when you're talking about something that's well-rounded. So one hot button issue around this country has been COVID response. And it's become so political because of the separate political parties and the value on how they respond. It's been said by the president that even early in COVID, that Democratic-run states were doing the worst at response. And then when kind of the tide turned, the spikes hit different areas such as Florida, Arizona, Texas, then all of a sudden it became a minimalizing of COVID and responses and things like that. Just a lot of blame. And one person that's gotten a lot of blame was Michigan's governor, Gretchen Whitmer. So kind of my first question I'm going to start with Stacey because I know she's so passionate about this, is why do you think Gretchen Whitmer has gotten such notoriety around the country pretty much since March after the president's comments? Why is she a villain to conservatives and a hero to liberals around this country?
So I think this is like a layered response because I do think it starts at the top with the tone that was set by our federal leadership, meaning President Trump. So things kind of flow downhill. So when COVID made its surface to mainstream, because of course it was lingering before then, but when it made its surface to mainstream in March and it was time to come up with a plan to get through the pandemic, instead of having a uniform response, meaning providing like a template that governors in each state can adopt to fit their state and their jurisdiction, the president pretty much said, fend for yourself, right? So he was basically saying you need to go out and get your own PPE, go out and get your own contracts, and have governors bidding against each other. So some governors decided to come up with like regional alliances where, you know, regionally like Midwest, East Coast, and they were talking to each other and figuring out how they can maybe share resources, how they can get access to resources to help basically trend it down, especially in hot areas. And Michigan was like number 3, right? We had New York number 1, and then Michigan was like number 3 when it first hit in March. So of course, if you don't have any experience dealing with the pandemic, you pretty much can only go by research with the, scientists. You don't really have experience dealing with it because it doesn't happen every year or every day, so to speak. So Governor Whitmer pretty much assembled a task force, and she tried to come up with a cohesive plan based on what she heard from scientists on how to basically stop it from spreading. And of course, with science is ever evolving. So things happen, things change, and new things come to the forefront, and you have to adapt. So in March, we went down to the shutdown, the end of March. I remember, I think it was like March 23rd. I remember it plain as day, preparing for it. The thought was if we shut down for a couple of weeks, we can slow the spread because we didn't know how dangerous the virus was, right? We're still learning. And as time progressed, we saw it kind of trigger and change. And as a public official elected in a high position, public safety is one of your responsibilities, whether we're dealing with a natural disaster, whether we're dealing with violence or a pandemic. So you have to take a leadership role. You can't just sit there and be passive about it. Because had she not done anything, kind of like what happened with the Flint water crisis, where we had Governor Snyder and didn't take a proactive approach, it would have been a disaster. So it was almost as if she was damned if she do, damned if she don't. And then we have such a divisive climate because, our president, he speaks like Democratic cities, Democratic states, Republican cities, Republican states, the Democrats. So because we have such a divisive tone in the country, everything became highly politicized. So instead of us being concerned about humanity and surviving a pandemic as a nation, like we should have been really uniform and united like we were for 9/11. We should have been patriotic about beating the pandemic together. It shouldn't have been Democrats versus Republicans, conservative versus liberals. It should have been, okay, what do we need to do collectively to save ourselves and our family and friends so that we can beat this and get back to normal, whatever normal will be. It shouldn't have been, capitalism versus humanity or politics over people. And that's an issue that has happened. That's why you saw the threats against her. You saw the protesters coming into the Capitol of Lansing with weapons, protesting, saying that their liberty and their rights are being violated, all in the quest to save lives. We're asking you to wear a mask and sustain from going places that aren't even going to be open anyway. That's not attacking your liberty. That's saying for the sake of health, so that we all can survive and our loved ones can be safe, let's shut it down. Now, one of the weaknesses was because we didn't have a united platform, even though we had a stimulus that came out originally and it lasted for about 90 to 120 days, is not having a federal economic plan to sustain people and businesses. And that plan should have been so deeply layered that they should have been shutting down mortgages, rent payments, car notes, utility. Everybody should have been shut down because a lot of us were not able to work. And then some of us were not able to get unemployment. You know what I mean? Because we weren't considered essential or whatever the case may be. And then it should have been more support for essential workers from every aspect, from hazard pay to PPE to us being safe. So I honestly feel like if she was not a woman, she would not have faced such heavy criticism. And of course, if our country was not so politicized and we didn't have such a divisive leadership at the top, and we had more of a united front, she would not have been criticized. And I am adamant about this. I really feel like if it was Governor Snyder battling this, he wouldn't have faced the same criticism, even if he was doing the exact same actions. So it's layers to it, is how I feel.
Right.
Now, I'm gonna let you talk, D. I gotta just add to one thing. When you say if it was Governor Snyder and he kind of wouldn't have caught the same smoke, are you saying strictly because he's a male, or because he's a Republican, or a combination of male and Republican?
Okay. Both.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So if he was a Democrat or Democratic governor, except obviously he's a male, he might have caught less smoke than.
Right. It wouldn't have been on the same level.
Okay. D, what's your opinion about the governor catching smoke, and kind of tie it into her response?
I mean, she said it pretty much. Governor Whitmer she is a female Democratic governor who went against Trump. She spoke out against Trump, and that set everything up. And we have to realize that all this would have not happened if Trump was not concerned about money first. And this is what I believe. Oh no, listen to everything. Trump was more concerned about the stock market than anything else. Trump didn't realize that he can make money off of governments, state governments, local governments, being against each other for PPP and all that stuff. So he was trying to capitalize on a pandemic. I have said this before. A lot of people were angry when I said this, but I honestly believe this. If Trump actually managed the pandemic like any other president would, he would have won re-election easily. He didn't. He lost. He's blaming that on people like Whitmer. He's blaming that on, let's just say he's blaming it on black people as well, because he's targeting the Democratic urban inner city areas as well. Now, granted, there are some governors out there who are Republican males, white males, and they're getting flack for him because they're doing the same thing Gretchen Whitmer is doing. And I'm coming up with DeWine out of Ohio. I can't remember his first name.
I'm on Mike DeWine. I'm gonna bring him up too. I got a couple questions for my Ohio people. Get up in the chat. I'm gonna talk about you. I did my 5 years down there, so I can talk as much trash as I want about the state below us. It smells like bologna and cornfields.
Now the thing is with him, I just read yesterday he got impeached. Yep, I heard he got impeached,
DeWine.
or they drafted. If somebody can clarify,
it's all smoke.
But that was against his own party.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is, and we've been seeing it for the past 4 or 5 years, is tribalism. You have these people who are going in back for the president. No matter what he says, he can be completely wrong about things. They'll still support him.
Right.
And that is an avenue where we need to, everybody, not just Republicans or Democrats, whatever color you are, male, female, whatever. We need to sit back and say, okay, we're 9 months into a pandemic. I personally believe this thing has been here for over a year. That's just my personal opinion. We are worse off than what we were back in March.
Great.
We have not seen improvement. There are things that we tried doing, just didn't work. We got to try something else. But people are so stubborn. They're so stuck in defending Trump or defending their ways or screaming my freedom that they don't want to change. And I heard about 2 weeks ago, there was a nurse in the ICU who works in an ICU where she had patients getting mad at her because they were diagnosed with COVID and they thought COVID was a hoax. So that's where we're at as a country. And like Stacey said, like Doc said, that starts from the top.
Right.
And people think what leaders say don't matter. It really does matter. So if the leader is saying it ain't real, what do you think is going to happen? we got what, 6 weeks before Biden gets in, and Biden just said that he's asking for 100 days of mass protection. You know, people aren't going to do it voluntarily. I honestly believe that we're going to go to some sort of national lockdown after he hopefully takes office. I'm not saying anything's going to be overturned, but I just believe that Trump is so terrified of being prosecuted, he will do something to prevent that to happen. That's just my personal opinion. And people are probably thinking, what does politics have to do with COVID? It has everything to do with it. You cannot separate one from the other. And that's sadly where we're at right now.
Right. All right, I'm going to kind of tie something back because you did touch upon it. It's still based upon that first question about catching smoke. I hear a lot about Governor Cuomo in New York on the campaign trail, on the Donald Trump rally rails. I hear a lot about Gretchen Whitmer, you know, and her response. I hear about California's governor. But the one thing that I always found kind of weird and difficult was the fact that Mike DeWine, literally, we were doing things after Ohio did things. So if we go back through a timeline, Ohio shut down restaurants and gyms and places like that on March 12th or March 13th. Gretchen Whitmer didn't sign off on those things until the following week. Ohio declared a state of emergency. 3 or 4 days later, Michigan declares a state of emergency. Does that kind of go back, Stacey, to what you were talking about being male, being a Republican, that combination? Because you never heard of Donald Trump and you never saw the tweet of Liberate Ohio. You never saw the Liberate Texas when in the middle of the summer they had to start hankering down on their restrictions because of their outbreak and lack of ICU beds. How come the same smoke? If the action was bad from Whitmer, if Whitmer was an idiot and is taking away people's freedoms, like I said, I went to college in Ohio. I got tons of friends down in Ohio. They felt the same way that conservative friends in Michigan have, but from the federal government, you didn't have that same rally call for liberation in those places. So Stacey, talk about where you feel either should the president have been consistent with his rhetoric for everybody that did it, or should he have been consistent in being silent because he gave all the power back to the states to respond their own way?
Right. So this is a perfect example when we look at the Ohio governor, Mr. Is it DeWine? Because I'm looking at his profile now, Mr. DeWine. So because he's a Republican male governor, he's respected at a higher level. And if people have discourse with him, they're not expressing it as blatantly as they do women. So women in politics have been suppressed for decades. This is not a new phenomenon. And it's also not a secret that President Trump does not have the utmost respect for women anyway. We saw what happened on his campaign trail. We've seen his history. Even when he's doing press conferences and women journalists are speaking, his tone with them, his aggression with them, how he's dismissive of them, right? So that level of disrespect for women in leadership positions, now that is actually across the board for him. It doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're a mayor, a governor, a senator, a journalist, he has that same level of a lower level of respect, if any at all, right? So you saw him say that woman from Michigan. He didn't even give her the respect of Governor Whitmer, right? That's an example of having a lower respect for women in politics. And even when you look at the women who were on the campaign trail during the Democratic primaries, he had nicknames for them, right? He couldn't address them by their name. So his level of disrespect for women in leadership, it transcended through this whole pandemic. You saw it. He even had disrespectful things to say about mayor women, like Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, because you know what happened with the governor there. That's the governor, Republican governor state, and they were bumping heads and clashing on how things should proceed regarding the pandemic. So there's that issue. And also, like I was saying, because we did not have a national uniform plan to use as a template for each state to adopt, each state had to figure out what to do. So we do something called policy diffusion, meaning we'll model after what another state or region is doing that appears to be successful and adopt.
Can you say that term again louder? Because I want the people in the back that say that think is no. I'm serious. People think it's like a class, and I like hearing terms like that where it's actual practices that governments do, that they share ideas. They don't work in isolation.
Right.
And can you say the term again so that
it's called policy diffusion? So that can happen from an intergovernmental area within a country. It can happen between countries where you adopt policies and procedures that's already been implemented. You see it has a high success rate. You take it and you adopt those policies to fit your jurisdiction and tweak it to fit the needs of your particular jurisdiction. It happens all the time. It happens between cities. It happens between counties. It's nothing new. So if you are given the task as governor, because we all know that governors have a level of control and autonomy for their states, right? Just like each state has their own constitution that's modeled after the United States Constitution, then you have to use that responsibility and be as diligent as you can. So what she did was at least try to come up with a diligent plan to curb the impact of the pandemic. Now, from a financial aspect, states don't have the revenue to cover the things that needed to be covered through a stimulus package that the federal government should do. When we were going through the 2008-2009 recession, federal government stepped up to help the states. They didn't say, well, each one of y'all are on your own, right? Especially in Michigan, we saw what happened with the bailout with the big three. And then, Detroit has a rich history, one of the only cities that ever filed bankruptcy and come out of it. So it's a lot where you have to have positive intergovernmental relationships, especially during a crisis like this. When we see a natural disaster occur, like all the hurricanes, the fires in California, and we see FEMA come in, and we see traditionally presidents come in and try to find a way to assist and walk the governors and mayors through how to, help their citizens get through with emergency services. It's the same thing that should happen with the pandemic. It shouldn't be divisive. It shouldn't be fend for yourself.
All right. Now, D, I'm going to kind of add to that. And I mean, this is a shameless plug. I'm sorry, Johnny. Substitute teacher, going off of the script. But, hey, this is what Donald Trump did for the economy of the Burden household, giving us that woman from Michigan. That was great.
I should have ordered that shirt to have it on today. I forgot about that.
Hey, he really helped the Burden economy. But on a real note, because I don't want to, I think part of being an educator, part of expressing things is we want people to be able to give their opinion. So I'm honestly going to ask these same questions if we get a conservative panel, because I want to hear the different answer.
Right.
But D, I'm gonna keep calling you De'Aaron, man. But
don't matter.
So a lot of my conservative friends, when they're questioning things, especially Governor Whitmer's response, they always go back to this. Now, I got a photographic mind, so I know the dates and times. Pretty much everything happened. So Gretchen Whitmer kind of invited some smoke because she questioned the federal government's response to the pandemic. Once Michigan got its first, it was March 11th. That's when Michigan had its first 2 confirmed cases. 27 other states had cases before then. So, but this was the thing that a lot of people said. Governor Whitmer is an idiot. It's people in our group chat and our discussion that said she didn't know how to fill out the proper paperwork and then criticize the federal government for their lack of response. What do you say to people that say that Gretchen Whitmer is irresponsible in the role and didn't know how to respond?
That's heavy. But before I answer that, I'm just going to add to what Stacey said. Now, you have to remember that Michigan was also a battleground state as well.
Oh, shut the front door. Really? That's why he wanted to make every Democratic element of it seem
pretty much
insufficient.
And I think we all knew that.
No, we didn't all.
That's true. Not
didn't know
all, but the ones
Okay.
here did.
Okay.
Okay.
It
Let me
seems
clarify.
it seems cyclical. It made sense for those to be like for Michigan to catch the smoke at the time.
Right.
I got
As
you.
far
All right,
as
keep going.
Governor Whitmore's response, she listened to science. And the thing that was unique about Michigan was we had two of the busiest northern borders in the country. All right, that's number one. I'm going to lay this out so people can follow on. Number two, our corridor is always busy from Toronto to Chicago. We're taking what, 401? Am I right? Is it 401?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Down to the bridge or a tone, take 94 all the way to Chicago. Always busy. Then you have the auto industry flying back and forth to China. Ford has a second headquarters in China. Let's also take in the fact that the EO that barred China from flying in and out of the United States was let's call it what it is. It was a front.
Mm-hmm.
What people did, they would just fly into Hong Kong or fly into Japan, then fly on into their destination. So it really didn't do anything. So you take all of that, and you got the spike that Michigan got in March and April.
Mm-hmm.
Add the fact that the city of Detroit has a lot of auto workers, and they interact with these people who fly in and out or who does international travel, take it back into their communities. You can see why we were having a big issue. And that's on top of Metro Airport being an international hub. So we had all the combustible elements you could have
Right.
at the beginning of this pandemic. And that's the reason why our numbers were so extremely high compared to the rest of the country.
Right.
So we had to, or not we, she had to do what was right for the state for those numbers to go down.
As you're saying, other places in the country, Atlanta, huge Delta hub, huge international travel, and you go to New York, you go to LA, you go to Jersey, all of these places that aren't just Democratic run cities, it was actually really easily decided or too easy to determine that if this came from overseas, if this is the China virus, it's not just banning transport or travel to China because someone from China or that went to China that's from Germany can come and travel from Germany. It didn't matter, but it was cities that had international travel frequently. They have international airports. A lot of people don't understand. Every city and state doesn't have an international airport.
Right.
Okay. So but I do want to touch upon the people that would question Gretchen Whitmer criticized the president of doing his job, but she didn't know how to do her job. Rumor is she didn't fill out paperwork the right way. She didn't request it when she said she needed it right away.
Right.
So what about the people that criticize her logistics?
They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're talking about. They're echoing what the president is saying, or whatever other conservatives are saying, or whatever they get from. I hate to bring this up, from the 8chan, 4chan, far right websites, where they just put anything and everything out there.
It's in print, so it's got to be true. If it confirms bias.
Right.
Okay.
And they like what they hear. They repeat because they like what they hear. It may not be factual at all, but they still repeat it because they like what they hear. The reality is she had Jocelyn Benson, who is the state health director, right?
No, Benson is the
Benson is the secretary of state.
Okay. So who I'm thinking the black girl, the black.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Dr. Calhoun. You talking about Dr.
Calhoun? Right. Thank you. With her, she has science backing up, and she was going with science. Science says this. Science says that, and people don't realize that. I believe in late May, early June, we were pretty much out of this, out
Yeah.
of the danger zone where we were
That's when
only
we saw
averaging.
the trend go, we had curved it down.
Right, we were only averaging 120 people rolling average per day testing positive, with 15,000 people testing positive tests a day.
It
Which
was
is under.
shocking when
Go ahead.
it was shocking when Michigan's numbers towards the end of June had doubled and were in the 200s. And when we saw 300 in July, it was like, oh man, this is getting out of control again.
Right.
And we were at 300. Now we are sitting at 6,000 a day.
Right.
But
And I know you're going to touch on that aspect later. I'm just going to finish up with this. Governor Whitmer knew what she was doing. She was listening to science instead of what the pundits were saying. And right now, December 3rd, 2020, we're looking back right now, she was right.
Yeah.
She was 100% right in her guesstimates and her averages and in what she was thinking. And now we're at the point where, okay, what can we do to slow this down? Now we're slowing down a little bit, but not to the point where we need to be at.
So being the devil's advocate, Stacey, what about when people, your background, what about when people say she didn't consult the legislation? She's being a maverick on this. She's being cavalier. She's working by herself. She is being a tyrant. She is acting like the queen. She is acting like a monarch. What do you say to people that say she isn't working with the legislation when she is, especially back in the spring and summer, when she's dropping these EOs, I'm sorry, I should say executive order, which will be referred to as EOs for the remainder of the conversation. But what about those people that say she's not working with other elected officials? Up in the UP, we don't need to be on the same order as Detroit. I'm in Kent County in Grand Rapids. Why am I on the same order as Wayne County? Or if I'm in Lapeer County, why am I in the same order as Oakland? So what do you say about that?
So I'm still waiting to see the plan proposed by our legislative branch. I never saw a plan. I never heard them discuss a plan. So normally this is how government should work, and it's supposed to work. Your legislative branch is supposed to come up with plans, packages, procedures to get through crises. And then they're supposed to send them to the governor. And then they're supposed to have meetings to discuss it along with committees that are established to hit on target areas of that problem. That's what's supposed to happen. Right. We didn't see cohesiveness. What we see is exactly a mimic of the federal level, where there's division among parties. So because she's a Democratic governor, and we have a divided party within our Michigan legislative branch, they chose to make it like a war between parties instead of saying, okay, we need to work together for the greater good for humanity to get out of this pandemic. Let's sit down and come up with a comprehensive health plan and safety plan, and then let's try to tap into federal resources for an economic plan to propose to the governor to get through this, so she doesn't have to rely on just her specialized task force and her health consultant, Dr. Khaldun. So we never saw that happen. Like, I've been looking, I'm like, okay, so where's the plan? Where's the proposal? Where's the meetings? Where's the minutes? So that we can see what our legislative branch is trying to come up with, so we can have more solidarity between our government executive branch and our state legislative branch. That's been an issue for me, because I've seen many issues in the past that have been paramount that the legislative branch wanted to address. Matter of fact, we've had different bills passed during the pandemic through our legislative branch to address different social issues we have that are not related to the pandemic. So why wasn't the pandemic at the forefront for a comprehensive plan? If you want her to take into account what you're saying, because they make it seem like she just suppressed their voices and was like, I'm the dictator, I'm Queen Gretchen up in here, and that's not what she did. Now, executive orders are often something that governors have in a state of emergency, because the need is dire and you don't have time to play political games. People's lives are at stake. So
but even,
go ahead.
But even not calling it a political game, aren't executive orders in place so that when a decision needs to become policy immediately, without going through the process of legislation. That's the purpose of a governor having that ability.
Right.
to
And we
make
were in a
executive
and we were
orders.
in a state of emergency. Like everyone can agree, we were in a state of emergency.
Right.
So she needed to have executive authority. But even after she executed these executive orders in the beginning, the legislative branch had time to sit down and come up with a comprehensive plan to say, hey, we understand these orders that you implemented and that you base it on science and research, but here's some things we feel need to be tweaked and addressed for our constituents. Can we do this? Can we do that? That's what should have happened. And I still to this day don't understand why that hasn't happened. I don't get it. It didn't even happen when we had the Flint water crisis. And at that time, it was more cohesive as far as party alliance. I didn't see legislative branch sitting there saying, okay, this is a serious crisis. We got to come together and come up with a comprehensive plan to address this and hold everybody accountable. We still have issues in Flint 6 years later.
So that's where we talked weeks ago that on November 3rd, you should be voting for a lot more issues. So like if I'm a conservative and I just sat back, I know I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, but I really got to question some of these Republicans that were back on the ticket. If I'm talking about for my vote, because they just kind of, I know we could blame Gretchen Whitmer, but I looked up the schedule and I'll just kind of give a breakdown of when some of the orders started coming out. March 17th, the Senate from Michigan. So I'm going to go top down. House can meet, but Senate met in session at 10 a.m. on March 17th. They met again in session on March 18th. They met again in session on March 19th. They met again in session on March 25th. Their next meeting for session was April 1st. Again in session on April 7th. And I can continue to go on with kind of that schedule. And then the House schedule that went on for the year, going back to March, the House for the state of Michigan met on March 17th. They met on March 25th. They met on April the 7th. They met on April the 16th. So these are times in that first month where the Senate and the House met. And even though the governor has executive power at the time because we're in a state of emergency, they still were in session. And if I could think what Stacey's saying is within that time frame, there are no minutes of a proposed plan outside of the EO. There are no minutes of a proposed amendment to the EOs. So, and everybody, if you're looking for those things, all you got to do is go to legislature.mi.gov for all your fact-checked information, where I don't need a newspaper article. I'm a law-abiding American citizen with residency, and I can check out if my legislators or my senators for the state are doing their job.
Right.
But the other piece I wanted to kind of tie into that kind of question of Gretchen Whitmer not working with legislation, things have kind of transitioned now. I'm going to get two opinions from you two. One, conservatives would say, see, the courts agreed that Gretchen Whitmer overstepped her bounds. That's why they stripped her of her executive order power. But now she's puppeteering the health department to do her bidding instead of her doing it. Now the health department is doing it. And none of these things are laws, so we shouldn't have to follow them. So kind of, I asked two questions there. Kind of explain how you feel our current situation is. And also, it's still trying to figure out, courts kind of said that Gretchen Whitmer was wrong, didn't they? Who wants that one?
I'll chime in on that one if you don't mind, Stacey.
Yeah.
Two things. Number one, that court order from the Michigan Supreme Court was on 10/2, October 2nd. We are at December 3rd, correct?
Correct.
The GOP still does not have a plan after that. That's number one. Number two, I should say, let me correct myself. They didn't have a sound plan. Their only plan was to run PSAs. They didn't even say what the PSAs were going to say.
Make
They
a
just said
commercial.
run PSAs.
Make a commercial while you were in the middle of the biggest
Pandemic.
presidential advertisement assault
Mm-hmm.
on media that has ever been seen, where you had billions of dollars in advertisement for federal candidates, even local candidates going for federal positions such as John James and Gary Peters.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about in between the Donald Trump, the Joe Biden, the John James, the Gary Peterson, sprinkle in a little bit of
the Supreme Court in there, just a little bit. The Michigan Supreme Court in there.
Oh yeah. So sprinkle in a little bit of, hey, you should social distance and wash your hands. That was the response from our
The Michigan GOP, yep.
House and our Michigan Senate.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they came up with.
And
I won't say that's what they came up in the House and the Senate.
Up.
I would say that's what the leaders came up with. It didn't even go to the Senate. It didn't even go to the House.
Okay.
And in between that time, our numbers went from what, like 800 something, with a rolling average like 7 something, to where our rolling average right now is like 6,000. And this all ties into, I told somebody this today. The GOP made a major mistake. They rolled the dice and they lost. Because this is all going to come back in 2 years with 2022 election.
Mm-hmm.
The first election without gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
And people can vote by mail.
Right.
So
well, hold on. I gotta help with my people, because you all know how triggered I am when people talk about mail-in voting and absentee voting has happened in Michigan for decades.
Decades.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a requirement where you had to provide a reason why.
Correct.
So now it's no reasoning. You can just do it.
In November of 2018,
right,
it was brought to the public to vote on if there should be a reason to absentee vote. Yep. And where I tell my friends, ever since that vote, I have not been back into Farmington's STEAM Academy to vote. I have not been back there since 2019, 2020.
Yeah,
it's been done in our kitchen.
Right.
So I mean, those things have happened, Darren. But continue.
Let me take 1 second to gather my thoughts now.
All right. Sorry.
That whole thing, because the GOP in this state has made so many mistakes that it's going to affect them in 2 years. I'm going to end it in that segment with that. Now, what was the other question, Vern? I forgot the other side of the question.
Oh, well, then the other side of the question is about kind of where we're at now and how I mean, there's some people that have feelings about Gretchen Whitmer, how she's still a dictator and all she's doing is enforcing her EOs through the health department now.
But they're not even enforced as like, we're going to take you to jail. They're like, we strongly recommend. We strongly recommend. We strongly suggest, because the consequences are A, B, and C. But if we do this, then we can have X, Y, and Z. So we strongly suggest you don't do this. We strongly suggest you don't do that. Right. Like, we strongly suggest you limit your travel. Now, we had the highest travel this Thanksgiving season, since the pandemic started. We strongly suggest you don't have more than 2 households in your house on Thanksgiving. We strongly have less than 10. We strongly suggest that if there's a crowd outside, it's less than 25. We strongly suggest you don't gather in the congregation because it's close proximity, especially if you're in the pool pit. Like, we're not shutting down your right to practice religion. I'm about to go faith just for a second because I really got to say this.
Go ahead.
Because the church is not the building, it's the people. And you do not have to be in the building to be connected.
We're not even going to go down there.
But I'm not going to do that for a minute. Okay,
where
now
two
I'm
or
just
more
saying all
gathered
the
in my
things.
name, I am there. I am present. It doesn't
Right.
matter about the architecture or the building,
Right.
because that is not how Christ reached his disciples.
Right.
But
Right.
But I mean, we had to take that
Sorry,
sidebar
we're not-
for a minute.
Yeah, it had to be
That's
said.
been
It
one
had to be
of the
said.
highest. That's been one of the highest criticism. Oh, they're shutting down your churches. They're shutting down your freedom of
Michigan
travel.
never,
Time with your
Michigan
friends.
never shut down the churches. So
No, because my church goes into the sanctuary every Sunday to broadcast live. It's
Yeah.
just not, it's not safe from a wisdom perspective, you know, from
Right.
wisdom and discernment to be gathered in a closed space with that many of you. Like
Right.
when the pandemic first dropped, 30 of my church members got affected by that, including our bishops. They were hospitalized. So, and that's how you saw the disparate impact in the Black community because of that. So it's a big deal. That's an issue. So the executive order thing being struck down, you got to remember that the Michigan Supreme Court was still conservatively led. It just transitioned. So you got to remember that too. So there was some lead there with that. And the Michigan Department of Health, their job is to protect your health.
Right.
So they're going to implement health orders. That's the job of it. It wouldn't matter if we were facing corona, COVID, or some other health issue. When it's flu season, they come out with suggestions about getting the flu shot, about washing your hands, about being conscious about germs, about going to the doctor. Like, this is not a new phenomenon. It's just been extreme because our leadership from the top down has politicized everything and uses divisive rhetoric that has basically screwed us all over.
Right. Right.
Now, I also want to add, because I think you're bringing up a point. There's a difference between the way the EOs had the ability to be punitive with fines and things like that. The health department regulations. So people are saying restaurants and bars are closed. It's not an order saying that you're closed. It's saying that it's not healthy and safe to operate in this capacity. So if I'm a bar and I have a tent in the parking lot and I got heaters and things like that, I understand because it's winter, I can still do all of my bar operations outside with limited capacity. It's just the fact that certain places, and because it's Michigan with weather, can't meet the health department's guidelines. So a restaurant will get shut down if it had unhealthy, unsafe conditions for the public.
Right.
That's why a restaurant will get shut down and is not allowed to be open. Think back 3 or 4 years to that Popeyes that wound up on Facebook.
With the roaches and everything?
On 7th and Gratiot. I know what you're talking about.
The health department is saying it is not safe for you to be open in the interest of the public's health.
Right.
The health department right now is just saying because of this pandemic, it is not safe to operate within, to operate inside. But I'm going to the comments section. First, I'd be remiss if I didn't, give my condolences to Johnny and his family. Not going to put his businesses out there if people aren't looking at the comments, but tough times. So we're thinking about you, praying for you, buddy. And just wanted to say that. And then I do want to go back in the comments. One thing
go to Tony because that's Anthony. Yeah.
But one thing I'm trying to like mix it in with looking at the comments. What a lot of people question Gretchen Whitmer's orders from back when she was still laying out EOs with the inconsistency. Like people didn't understand the pattern, didn't understand the consistency. And even right now, why are restaurants closed but malls can be open? Why are restaurants closed but gyms are still open again? And I'll go a few months ago, people, especially gym owners, were upset. How come a casino can be open? And if this is about health, how can a casino be open where all you're doing is drinking, you're smoking, you're doing all those things, but a gym can't be open, a place that is building your immune system? How do you all respond to that from the conservative end of the inconsistency of Gretchen Whitmer's kind of what she shuts down? It seemed arbitrary to them.
In my opinion, the casinos was one reason only, money. revenue for the state.
Okay. But even
And
I'll even go with certain things. Liquor stores were open, but restaurants weren't open.
Mhm.
now with
Uh,
liquor stores, remember we got some areas that have food deserts who are
Exactly.
they are food deserts,
Right, right.
and all they have to get food is
The local
liquor
corner
stores.
store. Yeah.
So I can see why liquor stores weren't on that list, and they're considered essential. The gyms. The gyms, I believe, are operating under strict. Now they're operating under
yeah.
strict,
Yeah,
strict
they can't do the fitness classes. You know, it's only at like 30% or 25% capacity. They got
Mhm.
signs on different machines to space you out. So I know that
And
much.
that
I
was,
haven't been in there.
and that happened because the owners actually, some owners actually got together and
Yeah.
came up with a
A
plan.
plan, and they presented it at the
Right.
meetings, and they even presented it when they were having conferences, like
Mhm.
on TV.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're going to argue about these inconsistencies, we got to think out the box. And when I say we, I mean everybody, because yes, there's some things that don't make sense, but when you get down to the thick of it, when you get down to the roots and you get down to understanding, like people still complain about liquor stores being open,
Right.
but you got to realize there's some areas in Detroit that does not have a grocery store.
Right.
Honestly, people were complaining about Costco's and Walmart being open because they're superstores and people go there and you get sick. On the flip side, there are some towns in this state, all they have to go to the grocery store is a Walmart.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
So that
people are not looking at this broadly. They're looking at it narrowly in their situation and what they see.
right.
There are
Because
some people in the city who have never walked, or in the suburbs who have never been to rural areas. There are
Yeah.
some people in the rural areas who've never been in the city. So they don't understand what's going on. And that is a big roadblock that we have in terms of getting to understanding people on why things are happening. That
yeah.
doesn't absolve Whitmer from some of her decisions, but at least it gets people to understand, okay, I understand now why this had to happen. Or I understand now why that had to happen.
So what you're saying, kind of going back to your explanation about food deserts and things like that, is the governor had things categorical,
She did.
meaning what was considered essential when we were in the most strict of lockdown times.
Mhm.
You were allowed, gas stations had to stay open.
Mm-hmm.
Postal service still had to run. Retail was shut down. And stores that supplied essential items could stay open, but
Right.
only the areas that supplied essential items. Now that got real fishy because I never knew so many people were, so dedicated to being florists in Michigan. All of a sudden, everybody I knew that was conservative, wanted to get their seeds, and it was snowing still in Michigan, but they became Farmer
Like
Jack.
it grow hard. You can't plant.
Yeah, they were Farmer Jack, and literally I made a video of it was snowing, and people were telling me how it was unfair that landscapers couldn't do their job. I said, what job you got? But I digress. People couldn't go on their boats. Why can't I go on my boat? It was because of categories of risk, and those categories of risk are kind of where restaurants are right now. Amanda kind of mentioned it in the comments, but I'll kind of express those parts of the comments. It's not about just being around a volume of people. It is the ability for you to enforce as a owner of a property or a business, and or people to practice some of the recommendations for the health department.
Mhm.
So at a restaurant, because you're eating, you are already eliminating your ability to be 100% of your time in a mask.
Right.
Mask is one of the biggest defenses. So right there, you are operating at a deficit to defending yourself against the spread of COVID-19. SARS-CoV-2, which gives you COVID-19. And then going back to her categorical, it was places where there needed to be more data points and evidence to show that they are safe. So right now, schools are catching gas because, and if you notice from the health department's recent regulations, High schools were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Elementary and middle were not. The reason being, you had more data and more information that said the spread between elementary and middle school students is not as high volume as it is with high school. Now, there's a lot of reasons outside of just like, oh, kids play, kids talk, kids are in each other's face. No, there's a lot more maturation happening in high schools, a lot more interactions that are closer proximity within high school and with athletics and things like that. It just was a higher risk for spread. So eliminating things that were considered high risk, but I'll kind of digress for my job. And one thing we talked about, I think it was me, Stacy, Brandon, and Johnny. I was still in my office one night. The toughest thing that I had to do as an administrator, I racked my brain all summer. She's not a follower on Facebook, but my girl Shauna, our head afternoon custodian at Lake Orion, my boss, our central office cabinet members. I still remember us standing in our commons at Lake Orion High School, and I counted, we can fit 88 tables, 6-foot tables in here and maintain 6-foot social distancing in our commons. So 2 people per table, 88 tables. So I said, that's 176 kids can eat lunch in here. We go to our auxiliary gym, we can add another, I think it was 92 tables. So I said, we add those 92 tables. Now we're sitting there with 180 tables, socially distanced, appropriate to handle lunch at Lake Orion, because if you, during lunch, you have to maintain the social distancing element. In the classroom, you can dwindle that size down a little bit per CDC guidelines because you'll be wearing masks. And we said, well, that's 360 of the 600 we need to eat lunch at that time. It just mathematically was not possible or feasible. And I only bring up that story because eating, consuming beverages, whatever, that is a very weak time for your body and for you to practice defense against COVID. And that's the main reason why restaurants and bars just aren't open right now. Mm-hmm. But all right, I got a couple more questions. I know that was a tie-in, but now when we're looking at Governor Whitmer, her response and things like that, and I know we got a history major, we have future PhD doctor from Wayne State University, professor. Where does Gretchen Whitmer stand with consistency to other times? I know this is a broad question. Like we said, with other governors right now, where is she faltering, in your opinion, with how she's responding? And or where is she not consistent with places like Michigan? So where is she not doing a good job from what you all even know historically about people addressing concerns or emergencies in their state? So maybe down south, Houston during the hurricane a few years ago, or like where can she improve from your eyes?
I think she is improving as she goes along, especially with the EOs. And we mentioned about the big box stores and things being roped off. And I remember this one story where somebody went in to get a baby's car seat. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get the baby's car seat because it wasn't deemed essential. It got back to her. She then defined which items were considered essential, which items were not considered essential. So she does make mistakes, but like most people should, she is quick to admit it, and she is quick to make the necessary corrections. Now, in terms of everything else with the pandemic, I honestly think that overall she has did the best job out of all governors. For this reason, she has stood fast on her word, and unlike other leaders, she's actually leading by example. You've seen what's happening in California with their mayors and their governor. They're telling people to do this, and they're doing something opposite. See that across the country.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem I see she's having, she's a female, she's a Democrat, and she stood up to Trump. Other than that, she's doing the best she can out of pretty much all the leaders that we have in this country. And her opinions and her thinking about this whole thing is proven to be true 9 months later. She will make mistakes, and she will correct them. And as with everybody else, we have to allow them to make mistakes. We got to allow them to correct them because we're all growing. This is something that we have never been through. Well, most of us have never been through. If you're over the age of 105, different story. And there are people who are over the age of 105 and went through the Spanish flu. Just to throw that out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to to say that she's perfect or anything. I'm just saying that her mistakes are being corrected as soon as she realizes them.
Okay. All right, now D, Stacy, I'm gonna kind of switch this up with you because De'Aaron kind of brought up a point. When she has one of her biggest criticisms is, first off, like when that lady couldn't get a baby seat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm under the impression, why is that the governor's fault? She gave you categories of departments at big box stores that she didn't want people frivolously going to Lowe's so they could do home projects because they're bored at home. She doesn't want people to go in Walmart just to get seed. Like, go get your essentials and leave. Walmart is the one that categorizes where baby seats are. Walmart categorizes their store, and Target where certain essentials are.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that the governor's fault? But I kind of use that story because I want to ask about her and Governor Cuomo get real big gas from conservatives about they killed people in nursing homes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, people say their orders sent people to nursing homes to spread COVID, and blood is on their hands. How would you respond about Gretchen Whitmer's orders and the high death rates of senior citizens in these nursing homes?
Okay, so let's talk about accountability. So if I was to grade her, I would give her a B, because there's always room for improvement. But I do think that she has basically
remind me never to take your class. Jeez, there's a fight. It's like, come on, man.
I'm gonna tell you why I'm gonna explain it. I'm not saying like, a B minus. I'm saying I would give her a strong B, like an 88, 87%. An 88 would be B plus. So I'm gonna give her like an 87%, right there at the cusp, because there's always room for improvement. Right. You gotta believe I'm a professor, so I'm gonna hold you to a higher standard. But anyways,
never take your class.
I do believe that she's doing the best to her ability given the circumstances. I truly do believe that. But this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. When you don't have any instruction, guidance, or foresight, right? We didn't have a national plan to give you any type of guidance on how to proceed. You kind of have to wing it and adapt as things roll out. So we saw that people were so bored, they were just going to the store on family trips. Like, I legit seen people out there with their families in the store because there was nowhere else to go. And you're causing capacity for no reason when people need to just be getting in there, get their essentials, and get out. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't need it. Or use a grocery delivery service and stay home and stay safe. You can do that as well. But regarding the nursing home, this was a unique condition because nursing homes already historically have high rates of diseases and ailments. Like flu season, a lot of them get the flu, they get colds because germs are just circulating, and I don't know how strong their sanitation procedures are. I do know that in my family, we doing everything we can to make sure that my grandmother never has to go to a nursing home. So we got to hire home care, etc., because we know how it can be as far as the level of care and things that happen. So I think that was like an unintended consequence of the pandemic, because you already have very vulnerable people in nursing homes, and you already have overworked CNAs and nurses in nursing homes. Now, when my grandmother was in a rehab nursing home, those CNAs and nurses had like 12 patients apiece. That is ridiculous. The ratio should be like 6-1. You know, how can you properly care if you got a whole section, a whole unit to care for? And then you're spreading germs because you're not even, you know, being as sanitary as you can because you're in a rush to try to, you know, do all that because you're overworked. So the system, the infrastructure of nursing homes overall is heavily flawed. That should definitely be visited from a higher level perspective of how nursing homes operate and their staffing and all of that. So I think that was like an unintended casualty and consequence. We had ICU units that were overloaded, overworked. Remember, for a small amount of time, we had the TCF building where we were going to house extra people at because of that. So nursing homes was also a part of that extension of, okay, we can't fit you all in ICUs. Let's also use the nursing homes and let's use the TCF, because some of you may not need to be on a ventilator, but you need dire care or, you know, better care. So we're going to place you in a nursing home. It wasn't, oh, we're exiling you to a nursing home to just die off. We're sacrificing you because you're higher risk and you're already going to catch it, and we're just sacrificing you. That was not what it was. And people try to make it seem like that, like we're on an island and you exile the weakest. Like, you know, that's how they try to make it seem, and that is not the case. That's not what happened. So another issue that we see is like playing out. It's difficult to be consistent with an inconsistent pandemic. This thing was changing every, you know, 14 days. Like, first it was okay, you can get off of services, then it wasn't, you can't. First it was the mask work, the mask don't work. First it was wear gloves, don't wear gloves. Like, all of these things that we saw, it was consistently changing. So how can you be consistent with a phenomenon that is so inconsistent and new that you can't even get a hold on it to really address it? Look at how coming up with the vaccines is the issue. Normally, it takes a lot more time than 9 months to come up with a vaccine. So that in itself is thought-provoking. Let's just say that.
Right.
So, but look at who's going to get it first. How are we going to spread it out? How are we going to make it accessible? Who's deemed the higher risk to get it, or who should, like, just looking at it's the politics of it. Like, we're still politicizing a global health crisis when it should be about survival and the humanity. So I do feel like when she makes a mistake or finds out that her decision wasn't the wisest, she's allowed people to hold her accountable and correct that. That's something we've never seen from our president in these 4 years. Never. And and the Republican Party has refused to hold him accountable because they are putting party over life, party over people, party over patriotism, party over the country. So it's just all coming down.
I'm on to kind of tie in as moderator and fact checker, kind of add some information, really. So one thing that I think, a term that people were kind of accustomed to hearing early in the pandemic, that if they really take it now, they're not hearing it, is the term novel coronavirus. That's what you heard a lot in March, or really January, February, March, April. You consistently heard about the novel coronavirus, the novel coronavirus. Well, what that means is, novel means new. That's the easiest, simplest way to put it to the world. It means new, meaning we don't have enough data points, we don't have enough information to understand this virus, how it spreads, how it moves. And we need more information. I'll say in the Burton household, we were spraying down packages, leaving them in the garage for a week before I touched the doorknob. I was walking to wash my hands. We would get food deliveries. We were spraying them down, transferring them to our own dishes, and then treating it like it was hazardous material before we discarded. And then once there were more data points, and you learned by about May that spread of the coronavirus over surfaces from simple surface touch was very low and very minimal. And even the data points that led to transmission via surface were more in the healthcare industry, because the volume of the virus on those surfaces and in those places were so high. But even touching upon the nursing home thing, what happened was short-term care facilities opened themselves up for short-term care. Like, that's their whole purpose. So there was no executive order from the governor that said take infected patients and put them in a facility with non-infected patients or send them in nursing homes just to spread it and die. There's no order that says that. That's practices and procedures. People that needed short-term care were put back into short-term facilities. Those facilities had their own independent screening processes and guidelines. Now, their guidelines had to parallel and they had to adhere to their health standards. But when they were taking patients in, some places had to have 3 negative coronavirus test results before they would accept you into their facility. Some short-term care facilities only required one negative test. And as I've expressed before, if we have a true belief in false positives, you would also equally have to believe that there is a possibility for false negatives. So if someone only takes one test and they have a false negative, that is how they can infect others, so on and so forth. But I'm going to keep moving. I'm trying to be contentious with Gretchen Whitmer, but I rock with her. But the other piece, is when she kind of ascended politically, with the tension with the president of the United States. Do you think, I'm trying to be the conservative pushback, do you think that she started doing things to posture for maybe political aspirations, gains? Maybe she was vying for, especially in April and May, maybe she was pushing some of her plans so hard to get the nomination to be Biden-Whitmer on the ticket instead of Biden-Harris. What would you say to someone that thinks that she had an alternate agenda, and that's why her EOs were so strict? That's why she was doing things the way she did.
I'll just say this: not everything's about politics. Everything has their. I mean, you can say it might have a little bit to do with it, but in this case, she was more concerned about lowering the numbers and making sure Michiganders, whoever you want to call us, wasn't dying at the rate where we will be so crippled by the end of this, where we're simply just people are just traumatized and all that stuff, and people will say that to justify their hate of her and justify their ridicule of her, and they're following the president's lead. And I come across these people every day, and instead of arguing with these people, I try my hardest to get them to think critically. I'm like, okay, so you think Gretchen Whitmer is doing this for political aspects? Okay, so and a lot of people also say that she's doing that to ruin the economy. Why would she do that? It's just
so that the economy was bad, so it will fall on President Trump. That was what President Trump's economy was so strong. It was the best economy that we have ever had in the history of American economies. It was the best economy ever. So this is a way to hurt the economy in an election year, so that I can no longer boast about my strong economy, which everybody could see was great.
And people were saying that too. People were really legit saying that too. But it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this discussion. All he had to do was manage the pandemic like any other president would. The economy would have shrunk a little bit. There will be a little setbacks here and there. But at the end of the day, he screwed up so bad that you had people voting straight ticket Republican, except for him. They were voting for Biden. That speaks volumes. Because even in PA, I'm going off the trail a little bit. Even in PA, one of the people who won their U.S. House of Representatives election.
Congressional seat.
What you say?
Congressional
seat.
Congressional. Thank you. He tried suing to help Donald Trump overturn the election, in his state, until somebody told him that he will be invalidating his own election. He decided to withdraw that petition.
Mm-hmm.
Then he refiled it, only focusing towards the president, which is not going to go any place anyway.
Hey, come on,
and
Dan.
There's a term
in the group. I put out my potential topics, man.
Sorry about that.
That was one of mine. Like,
that'll be next.
Sorry about
next
that.
Week.
All elections would have to be compromised. All elections.
Right. Let me just say this. People are willing to cut their nose off to own the libs. And to me, that doesn't make sense. You will rather harm yourself to hurt other people. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. Why would I have to hurt myself to make you feel bad? If I'm going to make you feel bad, I'm going to make you feel bad on my own. I don't need to hurt myself to do that.
Mm-hmm. So, Stacey, I'm looking at the clock. I want to keep us because I started us so late.
Yeah, we started. I think 8:30, something like that.
But I'm kind of tying in that kind of question about Gretchen Whitmer's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also looking at it from a standpoint of stubbornness.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers were going great in May. By the time we hit June, it was, you're looking at days with 0 deaths. You're looking at single-digit death, 7-day averages, week in and week out. Mm-hmm. Why didn't she pull her foot off the pedal if everything was going so good? Like, her continuing to have these orders, wasn't that kind of contradictory to, first, the goal was just to flatten the curve, not eradicate it, not eliminate it, but the goal was to flatten the curve. Even after it flattened and even changed course, she continued to put out EOs every 2 weeks. How would you respond to a conservative that questions her agenda when she would do something like that?
So actually, she moved in phases, and she explained the phases. If you guys remember, we had phase 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I remember, because of course, me being a woman, I couldn't wait to go back and get my hair done. I couldn't wait to go back and get my hair and nails done. So I remember, in June, the hair, okay, we was able to go get our hair done, wear a mask. We was able to go get our nails done, wear a mask, put up the plexiglass to separate. You was able to go back to the spa to get your massages. You can get all of your services back. The bars and restaurants were open at 25% capacity. So what she was doing was being strategic, because she knew that after us being cooped up in the house for 90 days, we was going to go crazy. It was going to be ridiculous if she just did everything back to normal. It was going to be just like Texas or worse, or, Georgia or worse. Our numbers were going to be where they're at today then, right? Because we would have just flooded it. So she knew. And plus, with the summer coming up, she knew a lot of outdoor activities was going to be happening, whether it was parties, whatever was going to be happening. So what she was trying to do was be proactive and say, we need to do this smart. That's what she would keep saying. We need to do this smart. We got to get this right because lives are at stake. That was her exact verbiage. So she was saying, strategically speaking, from science and what we're seeing in other states of what's happening when they try to open everything up. Because remember, in Texas, they opened everything up in May. And then by June, their numbers were looking like how ours are looking right now. It was crazy. So she saw that and said, we have to gradually do this. We can't just go full throttle. So I'm not going to just take my foot completely off the brake and say, go for it, knowing what the consequence would be. That would be reckless and negligence on my behalf, right? That's what she was saying. So then we started easing on down the road, going into fall, and she could foresee, which is kind of common sense. Okay, outdoor activities are going to be minimized because it's getting cooler out. We're going to go indoors. We're going to be congregating in tighter spaces. People going to let their guard down. People have already started letting their guard down. So it's going to be a problem, and we need to prepare for the second wave. So I can't let my foot up off the brake. I can't do it. I can't put my foot on the gas because it's too much at stake. And if I become a negligent governor, that is what tarnishes my legacy and my chance for re-election in 2022. So if I'm being strategic and I want to plan for my career, my political career, I have to try to battle this pandemic in the best way possible, which is where Trump failed. Because if you want to have the legacy for being the best at everything, because he talks in absolutes, then this right here was your life test. And you were supposed to handle this to the best of your ability instead of choosing the economy and capitalism over humanity. You know what I'm saying? Instead of choosing politics, you so worried about your legacy that you tarnished your own legacy. Like, you so worried about the economy that you ruined your own legacy and your chance to stay in the White House, period. So with Governor Whitmer, when people say, well, what was her underlying motive? Her motive was to be the best she can in this position so that she can have a career and save lives. It's not advantageous to her to be weak and just let them overpower her. She's already made compromises. She probably really wanted to shut us down a month ago, but she knew that people was going to be tripping, talking about their liberty being violated, trying to compare themselves to slavery, saying they oppressed, because she trying to save lives because she knew this was going to happen, especially with the holiday season around.
Right.
Look, we can come back to this conversation in 3 weeks after Christmas and New Year's and see where we at. Right. Same thing.
I'm also going to kind of, because I know we're talking about Governor Whitmer specifically, but I know part of this discussion is COVID and responses, period. Mm-hmm. So you continue to mention the president not doing something. And just like we've talked, there are Second Amendment enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. Now this is just Vernon Burtonism.
Shout out to Johnny.
There's this new wave of people, in my opinion, and I'm gonna call them 10th Amendment enthusiasts. I've never seen it before. Before this pandemic, how many people love and support the 10th Amendment? The 10th Amendment, for those that don't know, is states' rights. Anything that is not explicitly outlined in the Constitution, it is up to the states to enforce, to handle, to do on their own. That gives states their power. This is a pandemic, which is different than an epidemic, which means this is global. This is not just the United States. People were talking about Denmark and places like that and how great their COVID response was, to where they didn't have an issue. And now all of a sudden, Denmark is getting shut down.
Mm-hmm. Sweden too.
Sweden, because they're looking at the United States like, that's what we not gonna do.
Yeah. Sweden, who they never shut. Like, people got to let time happen. Bringing up a meme in April and May about what Sweden didn't do and why they're doing so well, and now you look at Sweden and people don't know international news because OWN doesn't talk about it. One American Nation or network
or Newsmax either.
They are the world is shutting back down. Mm-hmm. The world is shutting back down. Great Britain shutting back down. Zoom, I should have got stock in that. If people want to talk about the economy, the money just transfers. But even for a company like Zoom, they're not even charging people because they're looking at the essential nature of their product.
Right.
When it became educational, things like that. But my question is, as we say, the legislation did nothing in Michigan if they opposed Governor Whitmer's orders. Let's just imagine, if you had the power, what would you have wanted the president to actually do?
I'm going to start off first a bit.
Or do you want to go first, Steve?
Go first. You go first.
Okay. So I would want the president to work in a united front. Okay. I would want the president to create a template for all states to use and adopt. I would want the president to gather his task force, because he created a task force with VP Pence at the lead, but the task force was not coming up with conducive plans to combat this. The best that they did was come up with a stimulus package that we had early on. They weren't coming up with, okay, what can we do to curb this? Because we have the highest number in the world. We have the highest numbers.
Because we have more testing.
Okay, in the world. So what? All testing do is reveal the real numbers. Like, hey, we're testing more, and that's telling you who's actually positive. And
No, you only have more because it's more tests. It's not because, like, you got higher numbers because you remember the discussion.
I remember that.
It's higher numbers because it's more tests.
More tests, right? We're doing more tests.
No,
than
you
anyone.
still
I need you to
positive,
slow
but
the test down. So I told my people to slow the test down so that we can have lower numbers. Okay. No, you should, everyone, it should get to a point where all of us are tested, because you just need to know. We're in a pandemic. Like, you need to know. So you can't just say, oh, because you have higher tests, that's why you have. No, literally, we represent population-wise 4% of the world, but we represent 20% of the cases and deaths. That's a problem. That's not just, oh, let's look at it, it's only impacting 1%, of our population. No, we cannot diminish this impact to numbers. And that's what I mean by people have been choosing capitalism over humanity. They're literally saying, well, if you do get out of that 1%, you have a 99% chance of surviving, not looking at the lasting impacts of it. People are suffering from this. They have respiratory issues. They're having kidney issues. They're having heart issues. They're having mental issues after they come out of this. They don't even go back to normal. You know what I'm saying? Who wants to gamble with that? I'm not willing to gamble with my life, my loved ones' lives, my friends' lives in the matter of getting $1. We always historically come back from a recession. You do not come back from death. That's final. Like, that's the end of it. So as a president, what I would want you to do is unite and say, okay, just like on 9/11, okay, we got to survive and beat this. So we got to come together and do what's necessary as a country for the greater good to beat this. So this is what we're going to do. The federal government is going to create a stimulus package. We're going to work with the mortgage companies. We're going to work with your utility companies, your car companies, whoever. We're going to suppress your bills, and we're going to send you stimulus money to make sure you can have food and groceries in your house. And if you're an essential worker, we're going to cover you and make sure you have hazard pay and you have food and groceries in your house as well. And that you don't have to be worrying about if the bills or the lights are going to get cut off or if you're going to get put out, right? We don't want to have you worrying about poverty issues in the middle of a pandemic, because it's something that none of us can control. So if I had a say so and I could meet with the president, this is what I would say. I need you to be united, because this is the United States of America, not divided. We're not in 1860. Okay. I need you to stand firm, unite, and give guidance to our country so we can beat this, period.
I agree with everything you say, but you have to think like Trump as well.
I can't. It's hard. I'm gonna be real.
I gotta hear this.
I'm too logically wired.
Help me with this one.
You cannot get advice from Jared Kushner.
Okay.
Because Jared Kushner was giving him all the advice. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't worry about the stock. You want to worry about the stock market. If the stock market drops, this is going to happen. Everything Jared Kushner said about this thing was wrong. So in Trump's, whatever world he's in, stop listening to him. And he needed people like he was going to listen to him anyway. Not to kiss his butt, but to tell him the truth. That said, what he really needed to do was to copy what New Zealand and Australia did, in my opinion. People say about, oh, he was racist about, shutting down the borders, or he should, this about the borders. Here's my opinion about the borders. And people don't realize this. The deadlier bug came from Europe. The deadlier mutation of the bug came from Europe, specifically Western Europe. So in my opinion, knowing what we know now, all of our ports of entry should have been closed. All of them. The borders, the airports, international travel, whatever. No exemptions, no nothing. And it should have been shut down for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. We should have a stimulus system like the Western European countries have, or I should say the first world countries have. They're getting paid X amount of dollars every month. We only got one payment of $1,200 in 9 months. There's a problem.
Big problem.
You got people in these Western countries and these other first world countries. They don't have to worry about evictions. They don't have to worry about their water being turned off. They don't have to worry about their electricity going to go off. They don't have to worry about where the groceries are coming from. We got people who normally would be making $200,000 to $300,000, and it's another discussion for another time. They're literally in food lines right now because they don't have a job, or can't make they can't meet their needs, so they're relying on food banks. People think that people, regular ordinary people are relying on food banks, which is true. But you also got these quote unquote used to be bigwigs relying on food banks as well. That's the problem. TD Jakes, I'm bringing this up just because we're talking about food banks. Every single week, he hosts a food bank in Dallas. And if you've seen how many cars are in this line every week, we're talking about maybe 1,000, 2,000 cars in this line every single week. And people are asking, how is he doing it? How is he providing for all these people? I mean, we're not talking about just a food basket. We're talking about legit week's worth of groceries. And we have to understand that people are in desperate need right now. And this is where Trump doesn't have empathy. We know he doesn't have empathy. He doesn't have
no
anything
empathy,
like that.
period.
This is where people need to tell him, hey, look, in these red states, in Georgia, in Arizona, in states that, states he won, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, you got people hurting. You got to do something for them. Because if you don't do anything for them, they won't vote for the other guy. Whoever it was. Because and I will say this, his response, it wouldn't have mattered who he was running against. He could have been running against a jar of mayonnaise and Mr. Ed. People weren't going to vote for who he was running against. They were going to vote against him.
Right.
And people did not tell him that.
Well,
and people thought, or I should say, he thought that he had a way to coast to the election.
I'm
and we're seeing right now, his decisions were bad. And you see what happened.
I'm going to give some information to our audience. First, Jared Kushner. If the name is not recognizable, that's the senior presidential consultant and advisor for Donald Trump. So that's who if you had the devil.
They probably was used to hearing a Kelly Conway, but
Yeah, I'm not calling either person a devil, but you have an angel on one shoulder, devil on another shoulder. One of them is Jared Kushner because he's feeding the ear of the president. Other thing that De'Aaron brought up, it has been traced back, and I just want to throw a plug out to my researchers on Facebook, people that tell me I should research something and I can Google it myself. I use this thing called Google Scholar, where it's not just Google. If people are worried about media bias and the things that they're intaking, go to Google Scholar because those are peer-reviewed articles, research-based,
and scholarly articles. Yeah.
So you can throw those out there, but kind of one thing you said is the outbreak in. I'm just looking at one article. It has been shown that the outbreak in New York City came more from European sources than first reported from China or Asia.
Right.
So the continuous action that people can say the president did take, which was banning travel to China, that did not show it could be a badge of honor for him too. It showed that with that ban to China, the virus did not spread in certain places from China. That doesn't mean the virus didn't spread because the virus spread from Western European countries